In this GoDjango screencast, we're going to go over the basics of Django. We're going to use Django 1.6 Beta 1. There's not going to be many, if any, changes between the Beta 1 and the final release of 1.6, so all this knowledge should carry over. First thing we need is Django installed, and it's best to do that inside of a virtual environment. If you'll visit the first video that we have on the site, it will show you how to install a virtual environment and install Django. It's a very simple process, and I have a link in the show notes to get you started with that. If you already have that ready to go, the next thing we need to do is we need to actually start a project. When you install Django, it installs a command or a command line utility ready to go called Django admin that helps you start your project. So you can just type in Django admin and hit tab if it's in your path properly, and it should be if you're using virtual environment. Then it just auto completes out, and then we want to start our project. And we want to go ahead and give it a name, and it will generate all of the files for us that we need. In this case, it created the demo project as a root of our project. And then we can look in there and we have another demo folder. That is our main application that's going to house the root of our Django project structure. And then we have a manage.py file. I'll go over the manage file here in a little bit. First though, we have the demo folder, which is the root of our project. The interesting thing about Django is there's two concepts that you need to understand when understanding a structure of a Django application. You have the actual project, which is the entire encompassing part of a website, and then you have apps. Apps are individual pieces of work or composable pieces of an entire project, and each one of those apps is usually used for a smaller piece of functionality of the entire project. That's kind of confusing, but we'll hit on that here in a minute. For our demo project, the overall concept over the next few videos that we're going to do is a LAN party organization and aggregation project. What that really means is people can register a LAN party and get more information about it. So the first thing that we're going to do is, now that we have our project, we want to have an app that contains basically the information about our LAN parties themselves. So we're going to create an app called party. And we're going to use our management command, and I'll talk a little more on that at the end of the video. But just know this is what you need to do. What we're doing here is we're going to create an application, remember a subunit of our project, and we're going to name it party. What this is going to do is it's going to create a folder and generate some files inside of that folder for us to use. The unfortunate thing is we can't really use our new this app unless we register it with the main part of our project. To do that, we need to edit our settings file. So let's take a look at our settings file, and then we'll add our application that we just created of party to it so that we can get everything working. The settings file in previous versions of Django have been really huge. I mean, they've been big, and they can still be big. Fortunately, in Django 1.6, they've streamlined it for just enough of a settings file for you to get started in development. There is documentation that you need to follow along whenever you do a production deploy, but this is just enough to get you started doing development. One of the niceties of Django 1.6 is they added this base dir variable in so that you can use it. In the past, we've had to add this ourselves because Python likes to rely on absolute paths for everything, but in this day and age, we needed everything to be relative based on the environment we're in. So the addition of this base dir, which gives us the directory of our project, has been a real handy addition. We have some other things. We have a secret key. This is for generating various security things in the background. And if you create an open source project and you post the code out in the wild, when you actually go to launch that project, you need to change your secret key so your security isn't compromised. Installed apps. This is where we're going to install our party app. Basically, it's a collection of apps, of subunits, of things that we're going to use in our entire project. As you can see, there's a lot of things already built into it, and we've already added the admin, auth, content type, sessions, messages, and static files. These are sensible defaults that Django includes in every project as you start, and you can either add or remove the ones as you need them. Django has a number of apps that you can use inside of the framework in the contrib, and I really recommend you take a look and see if any of them can help you. The middleware classes, these are things that are executed and as it says, in the middle between the request being made and the code that you execute to do whatever it is you need to do for your business logic, and then returning it back. The root URL conf, this says, hey, for all of our URLs and routes, we want to go into the demo app, which is the root level of which is the root of our project where all the information is, and we want to use the URLs that are in there, and that's going to be where we start looking at all of our URLs. The default for the databases is SQLite. There's multiple drivers that can be used, from Postgres, MySQL to even Oracle, and you can look up in the docs the specific settings for each. Most people develop with SQLite as their development database, and so that's what they set for your default. And then finally we have where all of our static files are going to be, and those are your JavaScript files and your CSS files and the like. So now we've taken a look at our settings file and we've added our party application to our installed apps. I think we're ready to go. One more note on the installed apps is you know the name of your app by the name of the folder that it created whenever you did your installed apps. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at the parts of a Django app. So if you'll notice, you have the underscore init. This lets Python initialize the entire folder as something that can be drilled down into with Python. Admin.py is a new addition in 1.6. It's something that's often been added by people in previous versions of Django, so it's a good thing to go ahead and add by default. This is where we're going to add very specific things for customizing the admin panel that comes with Django, and generally helping to make life easier when administering the back end of the site. Models is where we're going to put all of our database stuff, all of our relationships, all of our models and their fields. And tests is where we're going to write all of our unit tests. And then views is where we will put all of our, you might say, business logic. This is actually what's going to handle what happens when somebody does a GET request or a POST request, a PUT or a delete. This is the area, the views, that actually handles that. In a lot of other frameworks, you might actually call this the controller. It's actually similar to, Django is similar to using MVC, Model View Controller, that's really popular in Rails, in CodeIgniter, in PHP Lithium, PHP, Groovy on Grails, uses MVC. And then there's the Microsoft MVC framework, where your models is your database stuff, your views are where you put all your HTML, and then your controller where you put all your business logic, and you handle each of those gets and puts and posts. Django, however, is actually an MVT, Model View Template, where model is the same. It's where you handle the database stuff, your relationships, properties, things of that nature. And views is what is traditionally known as a controller. It's where those actions take place. And then template is where you actually put all of your HTML. The reason that it's kind of a different take on the traditional pattern is the template is trying to be purely a templating language, and it doesn't really take any logic, because all of your logic should live in the rest of the application. Unfortunately, in a lot of MVC frameworks, they try to give you too much that you can do in the view, and you actually start putting business logic in your view, and it does not belong there. So this is one way that Django helps to mitigate that problem. So I talked a little bit about the root of the project, the demo folder. Let's actually take a look at that now. In here we have it very similar. We have our init, so that Python automatically initializes everything. We have settings, which is a file that we covered earlier. We have URLs, which is, in this case, it's the root place that our application starts to look for URLs. And if you have third-party applications, then you need to add your URLs to link to those applications so it knows where to look. And then you have WSGI. So we've actually talked about the views a little and the URLs a little. Let's actually go ahead and edit a URL so that we know how to deal with that and what to go with next. So the first thing we're going to do is edit our URLs file. And in this case, we're just going to uncomment a line. And then what we want to notice is this first part of the URL function call that generates a URL. So we have a regular expression. This regular expression is what we use for our matching of the URLs that come into our application. This particular regular expression says, in essence, that anything that comes to the slash, like buddylindsay.com slash, is going to be matched with this URL. What it's going to do from there is it's going to go to this next part, and this is where we tell it what code we want it to execute. In this case, we want to execute party.views.index. So we want to use the party app. We want to go into our views, which again is like the controller. It's where business logic happens, and it's where we process our gets and posts and things of that nature. And we want to call the index action inside of that view. And then we want to just name it, and I like to name it index instead of home. The name is very useful for when we do other things. We can do a reverse lookup based on the name, and it keeps our code nice and clean. That way we aren't hard coding URLs into our code, because that can lead into some major problems when we decide to go and change our URLs at some point, even if it's by like one character or something along those lines. So now that we have that running, let's go ahead and create our index action in our party view. As you can see, there's really not a lot here, so that leaves it wide open for us to do what we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is we need to create a function for our index. We're calling an index function, and this is the function, this is what's going to be called from our URLs file. And by default, this can accept any type of HTTP verb that we want to do. Usually it's a get and executes just fine. If it was a post, we would actually use this request that is sent in and do something like if request.post, do something here. In this case, all we really want to do is we just want to return something back for our browser to see. And this is where templates come into place. Since this is just an index action and we want to get the index of our site for this, we want to keep it really simple, and we just want to do a basic template. So this tells us that the name of our template is going to be party/index.html. It's kind of an odd name for a template, but what it's really doing is it's telling us the location of our template more than just the name. The fun thing about applications is you can self-contain your templates inside of your applications. This is really useful, especially if you want to distribute out your applications to other people, or you just want to keep things really nice and tidy. There are ways to, and good practices about having some specific things outside of applications, but it's generally a good practice to put application-specific templates packaged inside of your application. So what we need to do is we need to create a templates folder and a party folder inside of that. One of the things that Django does is when it takes a request and then we're going to return a template, is there's a template loader section to the settings file that you can either keep the same or override. And what it does is first it looks in your application for a templates folder like we just created. If there's a templates folder, it then proceeds, in the case of our index action, to look for a party folder. Since there's a party folder, it's going to go ahead and look in that party folder for an index file. If it doesn't find it, it moves on to another template loader protocol that looks for a templates folder somewhere else for a party folder inside of there and an index file inside of there. We'll get into that part in another video. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and create an index file inside of our party folder inside of our templates. For now, we're just going to keep this real simple, and we're just going to do basic HTML. And that's it. We're just going to do a simple hello world. And when we go here in a little bit to display this to the browser, all that we're going to see is hello world. So we aren't quite done with our view yet. We're almost there. Let's go ahead and continue editing our view to take us to the next step of showing our template in the browser. I'm going to be honest, and there's a lot of different ways to get data and pass data around and just get information that needs to get moved around so that you can actually render a template. One of the best things that we can do, though, is I want to give you a little piece of code that will explain it another time, but you just kind of need to go ahead and go with it and type it out, and that's just needs to be what you use until you understand the points where you don't need to use it. And what I mean by that is we're going to use a Django shortcut called render to response. And the short and sweet of what I'm going to explain is this will take the template that we have, it'll render it to the screen, it will take as we pass data along in another section, it'll pass that data to our template for us to use, and then also pass the request data as well. So this is actually a function call that we return. And it's going to return a response object, but we need to pass in a template name. We don't have any data, so we're just going to pass in an empty collection. And then we need to pass in context data. I'll explain this in a later video so we can better understand it. So we're grabbing the template that we're going to render. We're not going to pass in any data. And then we have context data that we have to pass to our template that's going to be rendered. This last line especially, just go ahead and use it and don't worry about what it does for now. We also need to go ahead and import our request context. So we're going to do that now. We have our template done, we have our view done, we have our URL done. I think we're actually ready to see something in the browser. The best way to do the manage.py file is to actually make it executable. To do that, we just do a chmod, and then we can actually call it without having to run Python every time. And if you run it by itself, you'll just basically get a giant list of commands that you can run with it. There's various things that you can read about in the documentation, and we'll go over at least another one in this video and more in future. But as another quick note, all the manage.py file really does is offer a helper to the Django admin file. It's really the same thing. All it does is set our Django settings module environment variable to our application's settings file. As an example, I'm going to execute the Django admin command, except we're going to set that settings file. So as you can see, the environment variable before we execute Django admin is telling, hey, we're going to use the demo project, and then we're going to use the settings for that demo project. As you can see, we get the same exact output as we did from manage.py. So part of the manage.py file, or the Django admin functionality, is we can run a local test server. To do that, we just do manage.py run server. This starts up a WSGI server that runs on port 80 that we can browse in our browser, and it'll actually execute our Django code like normal. You can also add at the end of it a separate port number. By default, it's 8000. In this case, just to show you, we're going to run it on 9000. And now we can actually go ahead and visit our website in the browser at localhost:9000. There we go. We have our hello world. So that shows that it's working. If we'll come back over here, we can see in our output that today at this time we did a get command and it had a 200 success on it. And we'll just hit Control-C to exit. Thank you for watching this screencast when we go over the basic structure of a Django project. Please join us for our next basics video where we discuss templates and models more in depth.